Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the VAK Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh Mohan, coming to you from Singapore.
Namaskar, Sumedha from Switzerland.
And we have a special episode for you today because we're celebrating a couple of things. We're celebrating 25 episodes. Has it really been that many?
Yes.
And we're also celebrating, we were supposed to celebrate 10,000 subscribers, but let's just say we're celebrating a slightly higher number than that.
Yes, thank you, subscribers. We are celebrating a definitely much higher number, almost 16,000 now.
Yes. So this episode is going to be different. There are going to be two things that are different. Firstly, for once, I'm not going to be the one asking the questions. I may actually answer some questions for one.
For once.
Yeah, but more importantly, this podcast has been a bit of a journey. It's definitely been a journey for me because I had my own preconceived notions about India, Indian history, Indian ethics, just the nature of the civilization, a lot of which have been updated, challenged. A better understanding has been achieved during the course of these 25 episodes. So, what we're going to do through this process is we're going to go through some of the themes that we've covered over the 25 episodes, a little bit of what I have learned, and of course, what are the overall things that have improved in overall understanding of this thing.
So, are you handing over to me, Utkarsh, for the first time? Am I going to be the one leading this particular conversation? It's always been the other way around for the past 25 episodes.
If this were the Olympics, I'd give you a baton, but all I have here with me is a guitar pick, because we look at what's behind me, you can have it.
Here, then I take it from you. And what you're saying is right, because do you remember how we started it? Everyone who's listening to this, and many of you are new subscribers, so you may not have realized that this is actually an aunt-nephew combination. This is a Mausi Bhanja Jodi. We are going to start our Hindi versions very soon. So I'm giving you a kind of sneak peek into that. So this is something that happened when we were together for Mahashtami last year. It just happened spontaneously at our family home in Ranchi. And we've come a long way from that. We've become more formal. We've climbed a few technical mountains for me. Yes, they were mountains. I am not a technical person. But we hope we've reached a place where at least the technical stuff is all taken care of. And believe me, I went through a lot of cameras and a lot of earphones and a lot of trouble. But okay, here we are, and I hope all that is all set. So, this just started with a conversation between the two of us as we were sitting in the afternoon, a lovely sunny winter afternoon, and I was drinking tea. And Utkarsh asked me about, we always have discussed a lot of things. So there were some things which he found very difficult to believe. But I think I did convince him to some extent with some evidence and some textual references, etc. And then he had been discussing this for a very long time, that perhaps we should bring this kind of discussion to the wider world. Because many people have the kind of doubts and have the kind of questions that Utkarsh has. And I hope to provide some answers because I am spending a lifetime learning about Bharat, about India, about Indic civilization, about our past. So, again, you may know a little about my background. I was a bureaucrat in India. I was a bureaucrat in the United Nations. Decided to give all that up just to concentrate on India. So I am here to provide answers as much as I can. And in case there are some questions to which I don't know the answers, I try and get them for you. So it's not as if I know everything, but I can research and read and come up with answers to many very often asked questions. So Utkarsh, the first thing, of course, I want to ask you is, do you think this whole thing is worth it? We put in a lot of work and a lot of trouble and a lot of effort. Do you think it's worth it?
The short answer is yes. And I will elaborate on that through my own, I would say, journey. You know, as a lot of you can tell from both where I stay, both some of the opinions that I bring forward, I'm definitely what you would call a very, very westernized version of an Indian person. Let's just say that to keep it very simple, right? Whether it's the guitars behind me, whether it is some of the things that I cite. The thing is, no matter how westernized you are, if you are part of the Indian civilization, and my bet is it's not only if you're born in India, I bet even if you are second generation, your parents are Indian or whatever, do you always have a curiosity, and there is always a mental disconnect between the assumed superiority of the Western way that is taken as a as a foundational assumption for almost the entire world that you deal with, particularly outside of India.
Can I
Versus,
interpose a question in here,
yes,
Utkarsh? So this superiority, this assumed
Hmm.
superiority, you've also been out from India for a good number of years now because you
Yeah,
went right after school. So do you think that there has been any change in this attitude, or is it the same as it was when you left as an 18-year-old?
no, I think it has definitely changed for the better in the last 5 to 10 years, is what I would say. I think the world in 2004 was very different from the world in 2024. So it has improved. You know, a lot of it is geopolitical, a lot of it is just population mix, a lot of it is a lot more information being out there.
Yes. And I
So,
hope we are contributing to that.
oh yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Uh,
Yeah. And at a very least, being like that, being of this is, I mean, anybody who has an interest, as I was saying, you don't know where to find this information. So for me, it was always that, if I know that, I can ask you because I know you're a resource, but I'm also very, very cognizant that not everybody has this resource. They don't have a historian or whoever, or somebody who's actually read through all of this in the family. So, as I was asking you the questions that day, that is where it struck me that I believe that a lot more people can benefit. It's really a question and answer session, which are questions that actually occur to me. Why do we do this? Why is it something perceived this way? What is the logic behind sets practice? So on and so forth. So that's what this is. The way I look at it is the number of subscribers growing and everything is amazing. Fundamentally, this is a resource. Say even 10 years, 15 years down the line, I have a question and I had,
yes.
okay, what
Yes.
was the original way or
Exactly.
Indian way? I can just go back.
Mm.
This is like
Yeah.
a textbook.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the purpose
Exactly.
of this. It's not really, unlike a lot of content created these days, and which tends to be a bit disposable. I just need to get something out this week, next week, etc. Our
Yes.
intent here is not for this week or next week or
Yes.
this month or so many likes or so many clicks. The intent is it exists in
Very
the
well
medium
said,
that is most
Utkarsh.
accessible to most people.
Yes, very well said. And I think that is what really makes it worth the while for us. Of course, for me, it's like, extending my passion. This is what I do the whole day. This is what is my life's work. So for me, it's just that. But the interesting perspective that I get when I speak to you is that I get a bit of I don't know whether I should call you an outsider and if it will offend you, Utkarsh, but I do get a bit of an outsider's perspective. For me, I am going to call myself the essential insider because I am from India, not just in terms of being born there. I don't live there, but my entire being is so rooted in the Indian ethos that sometimes, just sometimes, I fail to understand how is it that the person who's looking at me perceives me. And by me, I mean India civilizationally and India in terms of its past, in terms of its ethos. How do people actually perceive India? And it helps me when you ask me those questions, which actually, they don't never arise in my mind. The questions that you ask, they don't arise in my mind because I am perhaps too much of an insider. So I think we've got the exact balance of the insider outsider kind of relationship, or the insider outsider question answer and the insider outsider perspective to give everyone a balanced view. Wouldn't you agree with that? I think we've managed to provide a balanced view because that's very important for me.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it is, you know, no one can claim to be unbiased. So I think balance is achieved through slightly differing points of view, talking together in good faith. That really is
Yes,
the intent. Is the
yes,
intent here.
yes, yes. And what has happened to me also is that a number of people approach me after listening to this podcast, and at least I get a lot of feedback. I live in Geneva, and it's interesting for me how many people in Geneva are now listening pretty regularly to this podcast. I meet them here and there, and then there is often a discussion on what was said in the podcast, why, etc. So one of the things that bothers people all the time, and that's one of the things we have to fight against, they always ask me, you say a lot of things which don't agree with the mainstream narrative. There are some things, for example, about position of women in India or caste in India that we've been taught in school, that we have been reading in mainstream media, that we watch in movies. And what you say does not agree with that.
See, what we see around us is if my father, mother, they were Kayas, so I am a Kayas. So you feel it is birth based. And then you feel I cannot change my uh, caste at all. So obviously it's rigid. None of these things were true as the system visualized itself. So when the Portuguese first came into India, they saw a system of organization. They could not really understand it because they did not understand either the language or the people or anything. So they thought it is the same as their casta. Now, their casta was a race based, color based social organization where the whites were at the top, and then all the mixed races, depending on how light their color was, came below those. It refers to race. Our varna is a system of classification with no reference to race or color. To understand the so-called caste system, I will start with kul, jati, and sampradaya. Kul is the family you are born in, extended family, not the nuclear family as we think of now. Say your clan. The jati is a big group of people following the same occupation. So again, remember the word occupation. It is very key for understanding both the Varn system and its distortion, which is called the caste system. Which god you follow, what we call in English or in Christian terms religion. So that is through sampradaya. Jati is an occupational group. There are innumerable jatis all across the subcontinent. What you have been mentioning, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, that is Varn. Varn is a theoretical system of 4 large divisions into which all these jatis are supposed to fit in.
Watch the full conversation on the VAK Indian History channel.
So, in spite of the fact that, yes, you do provide some evidence and you do give some kind of all kinds of references, etc., it is very difficult to believe that there is this vast conspiracy theory against India. There is this vast conspiracy against Indian ideas, and all of them are being subverted. So, I really don't know how to handle that because, in actual fact, there is this vast conspiracy. It started a very, very long time ago, and it has come to fruition with the way in which Marxist and leftist ideas have taken root, not just in India, and wokeism has taken root not just in India, but across the world. But sometimes it's extremely difficult to get through to people who are watching this podcast to learn. They want to know, but they are confused because their own textbooks, all the sources that they have, do not tell them these truths ever. So that's something that one has to that I have to contend with. And there is yet another group of people. That group of people is aware that there are huge big holes in the history of India and the way it is presented, but they do not have the information to fill up those gaps. They do not have the information to give a correct and true picture. So for that, they want facts, data, information, and evidence. And that, I hope, is what we provide. So, Utkar, shall I start with asking you questions now?
Yes, I'm all set to be in the
Okay.
hot seat for once.
Yes. So we've done 25 episodes. We've picked up 25 or more topics just for this episode, and just to make things a little easier to handle, because 25 complex topics are not easy to handle. I've just divided them into a few groups, and this is not according to the chronology of when we released the podcast. This is not even that all these were together, because we've been doing things, it's like a flow of consciousness. It's like a stream of consciousness thing. Whatever we thought, okay, let's do this next week. That's the way we've been doing it. Whatever subject you or I thought that it's interesting for the current podcast. So I have just tried to put them together. The first thing I thought was important was to look at the foundational events, foundational history of this piece of land, which is called Bharat.
When we talk about a country, there are political countries, there are civilizational countries, there are civilizational nations. So for India, we have to consider both aspects, as a civilizational identity and as a political identity. And we will talk about both of these things in different ways and see how they come together or how they diverge. So we'll have to always keep these two different things in mind. There is something which is a civilizational ethos. It is a group of people spread over a region who all identify as being from the same civilization. Now there is also something called political boundaries. Civilizational and political boundaries sometimes are the same, sometimes they are not. In India's case, they are not always the same. As a civilization, it has, since it is the oldest standing continuous Bronze Age civilization, it has seen a lot of changes in its political boundaries. The same can be said, of course, of most of the countries that we know. Take England, for example, or France. Just go to one of these YouTube channels which show you year by year what were the political boundaries of these countries. And they have changed massively over the years. They can possibly go back 2000 years, maybe around the time the Romans came to Britain.
So if you remember, we have done 3 very well received episodes on the Vedic people being the Harappans. Remember, we have this huge corpus of the Vedic texts. We have the huge physical remains of the Harappan civilization. And we've done 3 of these on whether the Vedic and Harappan people were same. Very, very foundational. Then we've spoken about, was Bharat the first original name of India? Where did this come from? We gave examples from the Rig Veda, and everyone who's interested must go back to that episode and see how we have been able to prove that it was the Bharat tribe which actually gave its name to this part of India. Then, of course, we've also spoken about how this land was run, how it was governed, democracy in ancient India. Then we've spoken about how the Aryan invasion theory is a lie.
In Africa is the most genetic diversity in the entire world.
Yes.
India is second. Yes. India is second in terms of genetic diversity. And diversity means origin point.
Yeah.
So the more the diversity, the greater is the origin point. Is there actually an out of India solution? Is it that it is all these people who went out from here and actually spread their genes and their culture in Europe? A haplogroup is a group of people who share a common ancestor. Almost 1 billion people are R1A1A. It represents Indo-European people, these R1A1 genes. So Kerala, Karnataka, Central India, all of tribal population. The diversity of R1A1 in these populations is double that found in European populations. And remember, diversity
Leads to
equals
origin.
point.
Yes. Watch the full episode on the VAK Indian History podcast.
A total lie. So, Utkarsh, how did your ideas about the foundation of this land called Bharat change?
So, two parts. One is providing me with some data for long-held belief I had, and second is opening my eyes to things that I did not know.
Could
So-
I hear more about your long-held beliefs first?
So, for me, and by the way, my favorite topic in school was history and math. So, history was a big part of it.
Okay.
I always felt there was a disconnect between the informal history of India that you can talk about, whether it is Ramayana and Mahabharata, which is not looked at as just mythology, but something that actually happened, versus the timelines that is cited in the accepted, what the timelines are, where did civilization start from, a lot of different things, right? It was a very Western-centric, though of course there were the Syrians and whoever else it might be. But I always felt that the history that I've read does not correlate with a deeper Indian understanding. And maybe it was my bias as an Indian, but I was like, I'm sure there's more to the story. I'm sure there's more to be
There
discovered.
was this discomfort with textbooks, which is actually repeated by young people who I meet today. Those people, those young people who are in
Yeah.
school. This
Yes.
discomfort with textbooks is repeated. But please go ahead.
Yeah, so there was that. So, all the conversations we've had in terms of the timing of not just time, I don't want to make it about timeline. I want to just make it about the depth of civilization and the sheer depth is the right word because it's over a long period. It's had time to get sophisticated. That entire understanding, the entire piece, the Harappan civilization, together with correlating it with everything we know from the Vedic corpus, all of that, linking together the Indus Valley civilization and the Vedic corpus was an important part of it. Again, on the face of it, I knew that they should be interlinked, but it was good to put, like, as you would say, put a face on the name. It was good to put evidence to a belief. So that was one big part of it. The second part of it, and which is kind of, it might be skipping a few episodes here and there, is the ancestry of good ideas. And for me, the one that really stands out in my head is democracy. Because, the distinction that we made between democracy and universal adult suffrage, for me, was one of those aha moments where everybody says Greek society, great, in fact, entire foundation of today's so-called values-based, whatever, international rules-based order, whatever it is called, is that Western civilization is the progenitor of great ideas. Item Exhibit A, democracy originated here. Never mind that democracy in ancient Greece was essentially only the people who were landholders, only men, and only a small portion of them.
Yes.
Which is the
indeed.
false equivalence versus democracy as we know it today.
Yes.
And if you were to examine the real standing of all the so-called value, the so-called intent of a rules-based order where everybody is equal, etc., that was more in demonstration in the way Indian society was organized at set time of ancient Greece, or even before ancient Greece was a thing. So that for me was
in fact, the way they think of monarchy, Western civilization thinks of monarchy in a completely different way than what Indian civilization has thought of the king as. The king is a servant of the people. Remember, we had so many quotes from the Arthashastra and the Manusmriti and from so many other texts, which told us that the king is nothing but the servant of the people and person who has to take care of the welfare of the people. So you're right. And this whole idea of Western civilization being the progenitor of all the good ideas that we take the benefit of today, that is definitely challenged.
There is one person I would really like you to debate, and I don't know if it's going to happen because this person is quite prominent when it comes to the American media circuit. Right. He's a conservative commentator. His name is Ben Shapiro. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yes, vaguely, and
A lot of
probably from you.
yeah. So I agree with a lot of what he says. I'm not concerned. Again, the whole Western paradigm of liberal and conservative doesn't apply
Yes.
to us really.
I
But
got
what
you.
I'm saying is there are certain things that he says that do make sense. Family structures versus unfettered individualism. I would agree with that as an
Yes.
example.
That's a
Uh,
very, very Indic idea, actually.
yeah, which of course for him is part of the Judeo, the entire Abrahamic idea. So for me, his entire one of his arguments is that the the Abrahamic ideas which underlie Western civilization are the original good ideas, and
Ah.
everything else is not. So I mean, that is a good conversation. I am not informed enough to have it with him. He's very well informed on his particular aspect of it. But I think if it's possible, you should have that conversation with him sometime.
Yeah,
It
it's
might
the
be,
age of Twitter. I can always
yeah,
contact him on
yeah,
Twitter. But he probably
yeah.
does not know enough about Indic
No,
civilization,
yeah,
Utkarsh.
and he probably resisted because it will just go against
Yeah,
everything that he's held
yes.
sacred. But that's a good example for me. Whereas
Hmm.
reasonably, he's quite intelligent. He's very well
Hmm.
read, but
Hmm.
he is just not that information about Indic civilization is just not
Yes.
available to him. So he has no way to come
Yes.
to that opinion. So
Yes.
that's a good example for me about why and that kind for me is a good metaphor for how the Western world looks at itself. They just
Hmm.
don't have access. Maybe they don't want to have access, and most normal people don't. Right. So that's kind of where I think kind of what we are trying to do is this. We're doing this conversation obviously in English. We will do it in Hindi also. But the intent here is if someone wants to know and someone wants to understand, here it is. You can understand a little bit about this. Now, you may or may not agree with it. You may disagree. You may not like it. You may think we are big conspiracy theorists sitting here with half-baked ideas.
Yes. Yes.
But I can
No.
assure you, what we are trying to put here is evidence-based. Hence, that particular aspect, or even evidence, even the way we are talking about it is again in a very, very Western scientific way. We're just using that as a bridge to help provide better information for people who are
Yes.
interested.
I'm glad you said that because, I feel that using Western epistemology to understand Indic ideas does not always work. And it's true
Mm-hmm.
that we are doing it here right now, when I talk of historiography, sorry to get a little technical, when I talk of historiography, I have used the ways in which Western historiography looks at evidence. But in different episodes, I have also pointed out that we need a different methodology because our history is very different, very much longer, very much deeper, and living. We are not dead. You cannot study us like the Egyptian pharaohs or Egyptian
Mm-hmm.
pyramids because we are not dead. So, this is indeed something that everyone who listens to this podcast must always remember that we may seem as though we are using Western structures and epistemology, but as Utkarsh has very clearly pointed out and well said too, it is just a bridge. And until and unless, I don't know when that time will come, when people are as familiar with Indian epistemology as they are with Western, I think we'll have to continue to use this bridge. So, Utkarsh, question
Exactly.
number two.
Yes.
So, India, Bharat, unfortunately, also suffers from this perpetual reputational damage. There is
Hmm.
always some acid being thrown at its face.
True story of the sati practiced in India.
Sati was not widespread. It was not like, anybody whose husband died, she jumped into the fire. No. The lies that you see have been made up by the British, and you will ask why. Because there was a very strong missionary push to convert Hindus. And it was very good used as a tool to blacken Hindu society.
Yep.
So these figures have been greatly exaggerated. If you want to read the details and the numbers, there's an excellent book called Sati by Meenakshi Jain. There's a twist in this tale. So when the British came in, they changed inheritance laws, and they changed inheritance laws in such a way that it impacted property relations and devolution of property to the next generation. There was a lot of forced sati done by people who wanted property for themselves. Even after that, it was not widespread at all. So it's a lie. It's a big fat lie.
something wrong which is being pointed out in the body politic, in the in society, in culture, everything. So there is an attempt to show that if there is something wrong today in India, let's say there is something wrong, then it is because there is a cultural and social problem with Indians. It is in their very ethos, in their cultural genes. They don't know any better because they have been taught to behave like this. It's part and parcel of being Indian and especially Hindu. So this is something which finds greatest expression. And now I'm speaking as somebody who has spent the last 2 decades living outside India. And outside India, it finds its greatest expression in saying that, okay, you guys are casteist, which means you believe in inequality. You have institutionalized inequality and degradation of parts of your own society. You believe in hierarchy. You believe in demeaning and keeping some people in really, really bad conditions. This is one, this is caste. And the other is, of course, the position of women. That you have this whole idea that women are subservient, they need to be completely dominated, they have no voice, no agency, and they are merely kind of, appendages to the patriarchal men of Hindu society in India. There are many other things which are thrown at Indians, mud, which has tended to stick, but these two are the biggest ones. We really took this head on. And when we took this head on, we approached it from the point of view of those people who very kindly tell us that, your society has too many problems. You have to reform your society. You have to change the way you look at women. You have to change the way you look at varna and jati. And I tried to posit, or I tried to put forward evidence to show the complexity of this issue. There are certain ways in which the original texts and thoughts and ideas of this civilization looked at the Varnjati system, looked at Nari Shakti, and then there are ways in which the Muslim invasion and then colonization changed society around. And then it has led us to a place where there are problems in India today and we need to solve them. But those problems do not arise out of the roots of an inherent cultural, social, and religious deformity. They have been thrust on us. So on this subject, then maybe you can tell me about how your ideas about women changed. Because I was just watching episode 1. And in that episode, some of the things I said, you look very astonished. And perhaps your ideas about what is the position of Western women in Western society, Indian women, Hindu women in Hindu society, perhaps they were challenged a bit.
Yeah, and again, I'm also somebody who is, what should I say? I'm a willing party to be convinced, because again, my biases are more in favor of India than one would expect, right? So let me put it this way: it's a journey. When you're younger, especially if you are, again, I'm dating myself, in 90s India or something, and you're being exposed to Western society, more open, more liberal, lots of things it might be, then you get the sense that India is very conservative, right? That's the starting point. Ultimately, and again, it's very much a reflection of the times. As we sit in 2022, 23, and 24, being liberal has gone to such an extent that it is actually no longer desirable. It's kind of the snake eating its own tail, right? If you look at the extreme ideologies nowadays of all the identity politics and wokeism, right? So I was already biased to say that I don't think this is correct. I think it's gone, a lot of people, I think this is common in the West. It's a very common Western thing. People who consider themselves liberal in the West suddenly find themselves in the middle, because the liberals have moved to some weird,
Position.
weird
Yes, it's a
stratosphere.
very weird place. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that was that. So I think I'll tell you what surprised me. What surprised me is that Indian society definitely still has remnants of the Victorian era. It can get very, very prude is the perhaps the right
Yeah,
word, and there's another
can
word I'm
I just
searching for.
interject over here? I'm
Yeah.
so glad you use the word Victorian, because you see, a lot of the things that people think are Hindu are actually Victorian imports during the colonial
Yes.
era. And that is something that people do not know out of sheer ignorance and the passage of
Yeah.
time and the dust of centuries.
Yeah. So let me put this. I knew this having had some interest in history, but my point was it was good in the conversation that we had to again put a face to the name. So then I got a clear idea of what how is it, where do women stand in Indian society? It is what it is, what particular aspects are cultural imports, remainders from a different time that have continued for whatever reason, sociological reasons we cannot understand. So that for me was the biggest aha. But the main thing for me is, and this is an argument I've always wanted to make with people, right? A lot of people, if you, and especially in popular culture, it really irritates me. They talk about the people overcoming patriarchal Indian, the what is the word for it? The chauvinism of the Indian man. Or there's a
Yes,
lot of
yes,
toxic
yes,
masculinity of the Indian man, or whatever it might
yes,
be.
yes.
And for me, I'm like, I need to give you better information, because what the said people will do. And the reason this confusion happened is because there are a lot of Victorian imports still affecting several a big chunk of. So let's call a spade a spade. It's not like Indian society is perfect as it is. There are these Victorian ideas still roaming around. So that's where I having the information about what the actual standing of women is, how women have been perceived in Indian society and have been treated traditionally, and then all the things that happened with the invasions and everything we talked about, like the stuff we talked about, how the dowry piece, the child marriage piece,
Yes. And
clarifying that
Sati.
was so important. Yeah, and Sati was
Mm,
another mind opener, honestly.
mm, mm.
Right? Actually, that was the biggest mind. Yeah.
Utkarsh, going forward, we may think of inviting people to our podcast. So, Srimati Meenakshi Jain would be one of the first people I would like to invite, because she has made so much effort and so much research on these issues, whether it be sati or so many other very hot issues, some of which we covered in our podcast, and written so many books full of data, full of information, that
Hmm.
I think it would be wonderful to have a chat with her. I think going forward, whenever we start inviting people, she should be one of the first people we should invite. And I am very happy and very privileged to say that
Yeah.
she's somebody who would come if I invited her.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I wanted to say something about this, just kind of linked to your prelude to this. Now, you, of course, operate more in academic circles, right?
Yes.
I operate more in I would say, the corporate circles, so to
Yes.
speak. I'll tell you the difference that I see and the risk that I see. The difference that I see is I don't see as much of misconception as much as ignorance. So a
Mm.
lot of people just don't know what India stands for. People don't understand the breadth of the country, the breadth of the languages, or even what Indian values are. I'll give you a great example. I was having a conversation with a very nice colleague of mine, an Australian colleague, Australian Irish colleague. And she was talking about how the loudest, because we have all nationalities, right, at work. How the loudest nationality she's met are Egyptians and Indians. And she was basically then thinking that the Egyptian culture is very similar to Indian culture, because both of us are loud.
Oh my God.
And I was like, no, no, there's a big difference. There's a certain,
Oh
yeah,
my God.
as an example, right? Or another
Mm.
good example would be in Singapore. Everybody assumes to speak Tamil because 10% of Singapore is Indian Tamil. And then they don't realize
Ah.
that there's more to India than Tamil Nadu, as an example.
So you
I'm just
must have
giving
been
this,
happy to hear that I am now learning Tamil.
which is also a good news. So you can converse to some people in Singapore when you
No,
eventually visit.
that's a very long way off.
So what I'm saying is the issue right now is more than misconception. There is a misconception because everybody assumes Western is best, liberal is best. But there's no India-specific misconception I encounter as such in common average person. But here's the risk, and this is what irritates me. I feel that there are a lot of westernized Indians who go and sell this caricature of a very, very weird patriarchal
Yes.
India, just to aggrandize themselves, to show,
And
hey, I'm overcoming this from this.
yeah, Utkarsh, let me just interject. Day before yesterday, this very famous author, Anita Desai, very long thing on how Indian women are not allowed to speak. And when she moved to the West, she had to learn how to speak. And she gives these interviews to people who are not Indian, who know nothing about India. If she
Exactly.
spoke to me about this, then her lies would be shown up.
Yeah.
But you're right, people do this to curry favor. Who's that fellow? Pankaj, no, I forget his name, who used to write very interesting books, and he's a relative of David Cameron and lives in the UK. Such
Okay.
people are absolute disasters. They're a disgrace.
I'll tell you
And
who I remember, because a lot of non-Indians mention him to me, and I'm like, please do not get your ideas of India from this guy. Veer Das. He did a stand-up
who is
special.
Veer Das?
He's a comedian. He was there in Delhi Belly. He's a guy. Anyway, whatever. He's a comedian.
Okay.
He does, how comedians do,
Stand-up
right?
comedy.
Netflix special, stand-up comedy, Netflix
Okay.
special. He did one, and then, oh my God, such a caricature of India, all the worst stereotypes, which I think a lot of people believe. I think a lot of very, very Western Indians do believe in certain beliefs such as that. But anyways, so yeah, that's for me. What I'm saying is,
And
I
Utkarsh,
don't
now
think for
you've
the
made me feel a little sad because I feel it's a very uphill task for us. What we are
I
doing is
disagree.
pushing back, really pushing back against a very huge, huge complex which plays against us.
So two parts to it. There is definitely this bias from some Indians. There is definitely uh, the geopolitical Western interest in balancing India, because the Western powers that be are very happy India's coming up as a counterweight to China, but they don't want India to get too big for its boots either.
Yeah,
So
yeah. They want to contain India.
there are certain interests. So this is always there. The positive side that I see is, at least in Indians abroad, and I'm only speaking about people that I know. I don't know what people in India are thinking. I see a lot of interest in understanding the true essence, and I do not see these preconceptions. For me, out of 7 people I meet, maybe one person will talk all this woke nonsense. 6 people will actually understand. Like when I tell people about the VAK Indian History podcast and I tell them some of the things, they're like, yeah, great, I want to know more about this. So I think there is a bias in the average Indian going abroad that, why should I know? There is something good there. I want to know more about it. So I actually have a more positive view, maybe because of the people that I have met, potentially.
Well, I hope your view gets stronger, and I feel, generally I am optimistic, which is why I do a lot of work in this area. But sometimes it's like a labor of Sisyphus, and I feel the more I've moved the
Of
ball up,
course.
the very quickly it comes rolling down. But yes, we shall not be daunted by that, and we'll keep on doing whatever our little bit. There is this concept in the Ramayana of Ramji ki Gilhari, the little squirrel who was picking up tiny little pebbles when they were making that setu to Sri Lanka. So when somebody asked that squirrel, I mean, what's the use? This little pebble, no use. But the squirrel said, this is what I can do. And these little pebbles will hold the bridge together. So I think of myself as Ramji ki Gilhari, doing my little tiny bit and hoping to correct the narrative. The other place where the narrative is hopelessly skewed, Utkarsh, and I think even people who you meet would not have any positive opinion of India at all, is in the area of STEM. And we have done quite a few episodes on STEM. So that's for people who are not that Americanized, that science, technology, engineering, and what's the M?
Is it math?
Yes,
No.
it's math. It's math.
Okay.
So we've done a lot of episodes on math. So we did an episode on calculus, and I must say that it gave rise to very strong feelings and opinions amongst people, and I was very roundly abused for that. The origin of calculus being in India, And we also did something on ancient math and, zero, decimals, so many of the concepts that we use today, which are actually Indian in origin.
The beginnings of modern math in the 17th century stood on the discovery of general algorithms of calculus. One, and two,
Okay.
the discovery and application of infinite series. So technically, this was 200 years before the Europeans did it. Many of the people who have studied Indian math say that this was there in India. The roots were in the Kerala school of mathematics, which I talk about a little more. But you see, that is the reason why it gets so argumentative, and Western mathematicians get so angry about it, because it is foundational. It is that on which their ideas of the superiority of the European mind rest. So if you say that that was not original and that came from somewhere else, they don't like it.
We did two interesting things in terms of technology, and that one was the flying vimans. That was the episode which really, I think, gave us our jump. It was with that episode that we jumped from about 1.5 thousand to a very big number compared to one. I am not talking about the people who have lakhs of subscribers, but compared to one. So that was the one which had given us the jump. And you remember the one we did on Jyotish? So
Yes.
I thought Jyotish was one of our best episodes, and it is in fact the most popular one, because it gave us the truth behind a concept which is currently ridiculed. And the modernity of the probabilistic concept of Jyotish came out very well in our episode, don't you think so?
There are so many correspondences between the way Jyotish works and between the way AI works that it's just amazing. So AI systems also use the correlation principle. Self-driving cars, photo recognition, board games, etc. The system is given a pattern or a set of input data which it recognizes. So this correlation is also a principle of Phalit Jyotish. So it's sophisticated mathematical tools which reduce huge number of dimensions to a few manageable ones. So here we have the Navagraha and the Lagna as the manageable 10 vectors. So, then these become data points and many events happen in our lives. What kind of events are these? These are binary events, yes or no. I get married, I don't get married. Or ordinal events which are favorable, unfavorable, neutral. I get a salary raise, which is good. I don't get a salary raise, which is neutral. My salary gets cut. That's bad. Well, then categorical, which is category wise, what career will you follow? Or you have numeric things. At what age will someone get? At what age will they die? So then a person becomes a point in multi-dimensional space.
Watch the full episode on the VAK Indian History YouTube channel and podcast.
Yes, I think it was like things coming back full circle, because the way the data ecosystem today works is essentially analyzing crazy amounts of data to make predictive analytical models, which are then used to inform everything from investing to whatever it might be. And it was, for me, astonishing to see that this is exactly the model for Jyotish, built on the database of data. There is a foundational assumption that differentiates, for me, Hindu or Vedic belief versus Western scientific belief. There's only one foundational difference that I saw. Western scientific belief is very materialistic, which is it assumes the primacy of the material world, where consciousness is being an emergent property, whereas the Indian belief is consciousness is the base and the material world is emergent from consciousness. The moment
Utkarsh, we have to do a podcast on this one. This is a topic which is crying out to be discussed between us.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, once you make the assumption that it's just a foundational assumption, because you don't know either of which is correct. In fact, one could argue you can confirm consciousness, you cannot confirm with the material world. But once you make that switch, if you just assume consciousness is the base and the material world is emergent, then Jyotish makes perfect sense. It's just that that idea of consciousness being the base and is so abhorrent, is just so against how Western science works.
No,
That
and
is the
that too,
reason of
Utkarsh, universal consciousness.
universal consciousness. Yes.
Yes, that's
So
a very profound way of looking at it, and we will hope to discuss this more. It's a very interesting way, the way in which you've put it in a nutshell. It's flipped around. So we will have to discuss it at some other point, but I think I interrupted you.
no, so I was saying that, right? So the whole idea of making conclusions based on observation and turning that into a predictive model, which appears to be a very modern 21st century idea, is such an ancient Indian idea, which in Jyotish, that for me was the game changer.
Yes, and every episode that we recorded, we said to each other at least 3, 4 times, okay, this topic we must deal with in greater detail. This topic we have to do in greater detail. So, Utkarsh, one day we have to sit down and look at all of them and make a note of all the things that we promised.
Yes.
Because there
Yes.
are also people who ask us for some particular subjects to be treated, and although we try to respond in real time, I don't know whether we succeed. But we have one very, very devoted listener who had asked very, very often that we should talk about the Kshatriya spirit. Because I think he is a boxer who lives in the UK, and he wanted to know about the Kshatriya spirit and about fighting in India and fighting in ancient India. So we had done one on the Kshatriya spirit and the other on Bodhidharma. Which one did you like better? Because I think you were very, very fascinated with Bodhidharma.
Bodhidharma was the one which was, again, one of those. When I think of the entire Northeast Asian civilization, China, Japan, Korea, martial arts for me is so linked with that part of the world. Not just for me, for the entire world, with Bruce Lee and everyone before him, Ip Man or whatever. So the whole idea that the progenitor of martial arts came from India was just a mind-bending idea. And I had disbelief, because the thing is, you don't see martial arts. Of course you do, we talked about it, but in general, you don't see Indian martial arts in the mainstream as a big thing. So for me, it's a kind of thing that if I talk about it with someone, it is an unbelievable idea.
Yes, but you know, there was a design behind it. Martial arts in India was stamped out using state power by the British. It survived only in secrecy. Kalari Payat survived only in secrecy. So there are some impacts of colonization and colonial brutality which we have to live with today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, in the podcast on Vimans, we had also done weapons, which is again one of your favorites, I think. Weapons in the Mahabharat, weapons in the Ramayana, all those astras, all those arrows. By the way, Utkarsh, have you seen that new film Kalki 2898 AD?
No.
So it's sci-fi, Indian sci-fi film, which has its roots in the Mahabharat, and the Kurukshetra war is shown in that, so you will enjoy some of the astras. And then, of course, it's a dystopian universe, and the new avatar of Kalki is going to be born. So when I spoke of weapons, I was reminded immediately, because that movie has picturized the Mahabharata weapons in a very interesting way. I would recommend it to you. I'm sure it's running somewhere in Singapore.
I'll find it somewhere. That should not be a problem.
So I just had one kind of late night, midnight show in Geneva, and I went and saw it on screen. And I did not regret it at all. Loved it, in fact.
That's great.
So you love the weapons, and we have to deal with the weapons in some more detail at some other time later, when we go on to the next 25 and then the next 25 episodes. Of course, listeners, we have changed the periodicity to once in 2 weeks from once in a week, because I have told you about my prior commitment and deadline. I have to finish my 3rd book of my Udnabi series, so we have moved it to once in 2 weeks. So I hope that.
And the only thing I would say that is, there is so much material already out there. The funny thing is, I am part of the conversation, but just by listening to it again, I learned so much because, honest, because of the amount of information that is packed into each of these conversations. One listen is not enough, honestly. So if you ever feel that you're short of material, trust me, just listen to one of the older conversations. You'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah, so these were some of the themes that we looked at. We also did some miscellaneous things, like you remember the one we did on alcohol. By the way, I
Yes.
faced some flack for it because some people thought that, this is not a good topic for VAK Indian History podcast. I disagree, obviously, but I did
But
face some flack for
that's
that,
the Victorian relic in our society.
perhaps.
Talking.
And then remember, we talked about food and we talked about
Yes.
not eating beef. I think that was
Yes.
something for which I got a lot of responses, and people, Hindu youngsters, young men and women, were
Hmm.
very, very happy to have the whole thing explained to them because they live in
Hmm.
this world, say in Geneva. They go out for a party, people are eating beef, they don't eat beef. They have to explain
Hmm.
themselves every time. So that's why
Yes.
they really liked it. And then, when they are not able to explain themselves, they are given all that Marxist guff about no, in the Vedic period, people ate beef, no problem,
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm.
So we have
Yeah.
some historians in India who have been spreading these canards.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this was a very useful episode for a lot of people. And then, of course, we are not, as Utkarsh said, we are not like or to the moment or up to date kind of podcasters. We deal with history, but we did do a couple of topical things. Remember the elections? We did
Yes.
do past Indian elections, and then we did do the history of Ram Mandir when the
Hmm.
Ram Mandir was being inaugurated in January. And then we did Holi.
Yeah.
So I suppose we'll do a few more of these because when Dashera rolls around again or when Janmashtami rolls around, then we may do something on that. But as Utkarsh pointed out, we are not instant noodles. We are more like dum pokht. We are more like biryani. It will take time for things to get cooked and for things to emerge in front of you. We are
Yeah.
having this conversation as a kind of retrospective of everything that we've done, and you can see that we've put in a few of our clips also. And both Utkarsh and I tried to tell you how what the journey has been like for us. For me, of course, apart from anything else, the questions that were asked and the topics that were dealt with, they made me research so much more. So, I have been spending 18-hour days researching some of the topics that I have spoken about. So, I've been doing a lot of learning myself. It's one thing to know something in a superficial way, and quite another to know enough to answer questions. What has actually also struck me is that the more I know, the easier it becomes to get a comprehensive picture because things fall into place. The puzzle pieces keep coming together. As I have mentioned so many times, and I really want to make this point, ancient Indian history is being elaborated so well, so clearly, so factually and correctly because of improvement in technology. So
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
must also have an episode on the kinds of technologies that are being used today, satellite technology or so many different types of ways in which you can see beyond the obvious. And you can see signs of things that were there so many thousands of years ago. And we also, of course, still have to do the one on the oldest urban civilization in the world, which has been found in the Gulf of Khambat. So we'll do something on that too. So remember, technology is helping us remove the veil from the past. And it is helping us to get a very good, clear, and factual picture. Or it was easy to throw assumptions around. Today, those assumptions can easily be challenged. For example, the biggest one, the Aryan invasion theory, Utkarsh, which was our episode 3. Modern technology, genetics, etc., has made it so easy to challenge it and to throw it out of the window as it deserves to be thrown out. Wasn't
Hmm.
that another of the surprises for you?
Definitely, because it's one of the things I remember learning. And it was kind of something that's harmless, but it's sitting in the ether. You make fun, Aryan, Dravidian, North Indians say, hey, I'm Aryan. South Indians say, hey, I'm Dravidian, right? It's kind of a funny thing. But it really is not, because it is
So,
divisive.
Utkarsh, you have
Yeah.
studied in Bangalore. So, did this kind of thing really happen?
No, I didn't study in Bangalore. I mean, I didn't. Okay. I have many South Indian friends. I would say I have more South Indian friends than North Indian friends.
Oh, you didn't
And
study, didn't
I,
go
I
to
just
school in
studied,
Bangalore.
I didn't study history in Bangalore. I studied
Oh,
11th and 12th, which would be science.
okay. Okay.
History was studied till class 10.
Okay.
Would have loved to study more history, of course. But
Okay.
yes, but it's there. It's there. Now, the good thing is, at least outside of India, though, when people come initially, they divide into their groups. But eventually, I don't think there's any difference. I think people of all North, South hang out together. At least my experience. But it could
I
be.
think we busted the Aryan Dravidian nonsense really well. And that was one of the
Yeah.
clips which really went viral.
Yes. Yes.
And we'll put it here
And
again.
yeah. We should, and it's of so much interest. I was at a birthday party just now, last Sunday, and I was telling them about this, and they asked me, what are the myths that you're busting? He literally asked me the question. I told him Aryan invasion. He says it didn't happen. I said no. And then I told him
So, the
a little
VAK
bit
Indian
about
History podcast is also myth busting. We
yeah,
try to give you everything, and on top of that, remove some false ideas from your mind. And in that
yeah,
context, Utkarsh, I think it's a good time to announce that we will be starting a Hindi version now.
yes,
And Utkarsh is ready, game to do everything in Hindi. So perhaps what we'll do is have shorter ones in the beginning, 10,
yeah,
15-minute ones of the topics that are really, really popular. This is because I am getting very frequent and very demanding messages about starting a Hindi version of this. Simple, to the point. This is for those people who want to be not ignorant but aware, so that they can give answers to people
hmm,
who say things which are not factually correct about India's
hmm,
past. So we
hmm,
will be starting that. Look out for that. We'll be starting the recording as soon as next week. So that's
hmm.
something you can look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. You can look forward to great content. Maybe not such great Hindi coming from me, but that's okay. We'll figure it out.
No, we'll have you speaking Hindi as fluently as anyone living in Madhya Pradesh very soon.
Yeah.
And
I think I should give
note, I didn't say Bihar or Jharkhand, because the best Hindi comes from Madhya Pradesh
No,
or Uttar
what I was going
Pradesh.
to say is that all the subjects I used to study in school, the one I used to spend the most time on and get least marks in was
Was
Hindi,
Hindi? Oh my
unfortunately.
God.
Yeah.
So, Utkarsh, I am learning Tamil and you can learn Hindi.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you launch
So,
the VAK. But you'll need to find a different co-host for the VAK Indian History Tamil version.
oh my God, that's ambitious. No. I'm nowhere near that yet. I spent half an hour reading 3 sentences in the morning. So very far
Okay, that
from
sounds like great
any.
progress. I can read Hindi much faster than that, I can assure you.
So people, it's been a great journey. We are going to continue this journey. Keep walking with us. Keep telling us which direction you want this journey to go. We are learning and you're learning. And we'll keep doing this, because I think it's something that we love. We found our feet, I think. But keep showering the love.
Yeah. And again, please also keep asking the questions and providing suggestions. They are very, very helpful.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Yes, I do want to give a quick one on this one, right? Because it's a very standard YouTuber thing to say. So as someone who does YouTube also on the side, and also as a former marketer, I do want to say this. We live in the attention economy. Everybody from TikTokers to companies are out to get your attention. So what happens is that people who generally win the attention economy are people who make the most outrageous, most catchy content. This is not favorable to making good content. So if ever there is good content, non-catchy, non-controversial for the sake of it, but real content out there that you like, the best thing that you can do is demonstrate action by liking, subscribing, and sharing, because that gives the algorithms the prompt in order to get this to more people. Because we are not going to be able to put some sort of random, just for the sake of eyeballs, right? We don't want to do that, and nor is that something we'll be able to do well. So that's how you can really help. If you really want good content to reach more people, it's a
Yes.
small thing, zero cost to you, that you can do.
Yes. And that I think is the good stage, good point at which to end this particular retrospective session. We will see you next time with something very interesting, which we are already cooking up. And you're going to love that. You're also going to love the Hindi podcast, I hope. So see you next time. Namaskar from Sumedha.
Take care.